Welcome to ARC360 On Demand. Brought to you in association with corporate partners BASF, BMS, CAPS, Copart, Max, Integral, Enterprise Rent-A-Car, Innovation Group, Merca, Nationwide Vehicle Recovery Assistance, S&G Response, and Sherwin-Williams, along with our partners Aztec, the Green Parts Specialists, Indasa, and Preco UK. We hope you enjoy the show.
Hello and welcome to ARC360 On Demand, the supply chain special. With me, your host, Mark Hadaway, co-founder of ARC360. So during this session, we take a closer look at what is happening across the supply chain right now and provide an in-depth insight into what it means for the claims sector. We ask, are we seeing supply chain challenges across the sector? How are the well-documented issues with raw materials being felt? Are costs being impacted? Have we seen the summer peak in claims volumes already? And how are EVs likely to impact? We hear on the above and plenty more from this week's specialist lineup of Paul Sell, Associate Director of Trend Tracker, Kelvin Waugh, Managing Director of Preco UK, Richard Steer, CEO of Steer Automotive, Jeff Mack, National Account Manager, Nationwide Vehicle Recovery Assistance, and Mike Partridge, Paint and Body Business Manager, Volkswagen Group UK. Thank you all so much for joining us, and please do feel free to drop me a line, mark@iloveclaims.com, with any observations or thoughts provoked during today's session. Thank you very much to our today's special guests, and of course, to you all for joining us. Hope you enjoyed the show.
Happy to talk a little bit about what we're seeing happening in June as we progress now, with repair volumes up, but also some other trends up, which we'll go through now, and really is the point of the conversation today. So firstly, I think traffic congestion report from SMMT and Department of Transport, and I'm sure there's various other mobility data out there which are all showing an upward trend of increased traffic congestion, sort of almost back to pre-pandemic levels, circa 95%, I think, of vehicle use being stated. The TomTom data indicates that the traffic patterns are almost where they used to be. Not quite the same. I think we're still seeing an influence of flexible working there, but certainly you're starting to see a traffic pattern more like we were seeing pre-pandemic. That, of course, is leading to more repairs. So we saw a big jump in June to over 137,000 repairs in the data provided by Adatex that we analyse, which was 93% compared to June 2019, which is fantastic, just what everyone needed, a bit higher than we anticipated, but certainly at the optimistic levels of what we were predicting. And I guess for us now, it's a case of is that the new level, or is it a little bit of a summer spike? It'd be interesting to see as we go forward over the next few months how that starts to land. However, as well as repair volumes going up, repair costs have been going up year on year, and we've got some graphs here looking at the last 2 years' impact, and then specifically looking at parts costs, which appears to be the main part of an increase. However, paint has also increased, as has additional charges. Difficult to know exactly within additional charges what proportion is for what particular services, but obviously that will include any COVID charges that were paid in the last year or two, as well as any increase in ADAS recalibrations. So looking at that a little bit in more detail, SMMT published the highest selling models in June, of which Tesla was number one, which was a huge move for them, over 1,000 more than the Volkswagen Golf, or nearly 1,000 more than the Volkswagen Golf. So I've done a little bit of analysis looking at those top 5 models and their repair costs for the month of June in 2019, 2020 and 2021. And generally, there's a year-on-year increase in average repair costs. The Puma and the Tesla obviously are new models, so there's no data for 2019. The data for 2020 was still sort of emerging as volumes settled down. The 2021 line, the red one, is probably the one to use as a more accurate description of costs. So a level deeper again, we have split now into paint, parts, labour and additional costs. Parts costs are up year on year for Fiesta and Golf. The Corsa is pretty static. Paint costs are up year on year for the Fiesta, Golf and Corsa. The additional costs are up, as we've already discussed. Labour is also up year on year, but I had a little look at that in more detail, and it looks like the labour hours have crept up year on year as well. So as an example, for the Fiesta, 7.8 hours on average for a job in 2019, now up at 9 hours in 2021. So I think that is really the small increase you can see on that labour graph is more to do with an increase in hours rather than necessarily an increase in labour costs. So we've seen increased demand into the sector, increase in costs, but also an increase in parts of availability issues and delays. So I've just put together here a snapshot of news stories, because this isn't just a UK problem, it's a global problem. And it's really caused by this supply versus demand catch up. So obviously all the manufacturers during different points of COVID either closed production or reduced production. And then on top of that, we had Brexit to deal with. On top of that, there was the Suez Canal issues. And therefore, I think as people have come out of various restrictions being released and cars that are on the road and repair volumes are up, unfortunately, the part supply and the production of cars overall just hasn't quite managed to catch up as yet. Our most recent survey into the sector highlighted that the vast majority of repairers, I think 92%, were seeing an impact of a delay, some as few as 2 days, some as high as 10, some even more than that. So I think it can vary, obviously, by manufacturer. But obviously the production issues are caused predominantly by the semiconductor problems, whereas the crash repair is different parts delays, of course, but all caused really by the similar sort of impacts of the COVID pandemic, the initial factory shutdowns, and then the sort of various domino effect of issues that have happened thereafter. So obviously we're now into a bit of a catch-up, trying to get that demand through. So in summary, increasing volume of and cost of repairs, increasing parts delays and shortages impacting production and the repair key-to-key and cycle times, with incurring additional claims costs as a result of that. Now, as I said, it's a summary. It's not all marks. It's probably not affecting all people, but certainly it's a trend that we're seeing and hearing that we think is one worth debating.
So thanks very much for joining us, Kelvin. Really, really appreciate your time. So just give us a little bit of an update on Preco UK at the moment, if you can.
Preco's, we're having a busy time at the minute. Sales are buoyant. We've got a new app that's about to be launched in the next 2 weeks. Basically, we just had it signed off by Apple, and it's basically, it's registration driven. Go up, put it in, and it literally just brings any part for that vehicle, stock you can order online. It's what we've been working on the last 3 or 4 months. So I'm hoping 1st of August, we're ready to push it. So
great stuff. Nice technological advancement there. And the business in general, how are things faring?
It's good. Yeah, it's good. I think from a sales point of view, we're up. We're up on last year. A few challenges, obviously. We'll discuss them. A little bit later. But it's good. It's good. I'm not really struggling with COVID. We've had the odd member of staff off over the last 3 months, but everyone within the business has been vaccinated. So it's it's back to normal for me.
Brilliant. It's great to hear. And tell us a little bit about those kind of challenges that you sort of mentioned there, because there's a bit of talk at the moment in terms of supply chains challenges globally. It's not just any one individual, but kind of what are you kind of feeling and seeing from your side?
Well, the two biggest challenges we've got are it's not really supplier, but the supply, the parts are coming through without any problems. It's just the physical cost, the shipping prices, the container prices in the last 8 months have increased tenfold. So back in November, we were paying $1,600 a container. Latest price we've had from the shipping lines is $21,000. It's absolutely crazy. The other one is just the raw material prices from the suppliers. I spoke to a plastics manufacturer yesterday, and he's seen increases of 15% in the last 3 months.
Wow.
So that's, he's trying to absorb some of the costs, but he can't absorb everything, so it's being passed on to us. We track the OE price, we track competitors' pricing, and it's just increasing. Obviously, we try and absorb as much as we can, but we've had to increase our prices. But with supplies still available. We're not seeing any disruption. It's just the physical increase of of the product, of the price of the product.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. And I suppose we're looking at numbers. Average parts cost per repair risen 12% since 2019. That's sort of Aldertex data. Is this a trend that's likely to continue, or is it be something that kind of will wash out in time, do you think?
I think we've got this problem for the next 12 months. That's the feedback I'm getting from the suppliers and from the shipping agents. I was hoping, obviously there's been ships mothballed due to COVID, and there's talk September 1 that the shipping lines are going to basically release more boats. So hopefully that may decrease the cost, but I still think it'll take 12 months to wash it through.
Yeah.
I don't see any improvements this year. If anything, I can see the price is probably going up a little bit more.
Okay, great insight. Thanks very much for your time, Kelvin. Really appreciate it.
All right, thanks a lot.
Okay, so I'm here with Richard Steer. Thanks very much for joining us, Richard. How are you?
Okay, thanks, Mark. Yeah, all good, thanks. Yeah, you?
Good, man. I am very well, thank you. And thank you so much for joining us today. So some quick fire questions coming your way, if you like. So what are the supply chain forces impacting on repairers currently?
Unquestionably, parts delays have become an increasingly bigger issue over the last few months, initially caused by Brexit, but obviously the supply chain challenges that the vehicle manufacturers are currently facing are very evident for all to see. You haven't got to go too far into the papers to see exactly what's going on and some of the challenges they're experiencing, and that naturally has a knock-on effect to the aftermarket. What does that mean for us in real terms? It means that ultimately we're facing challenges with key-to-key times, which of course impacts on mobility costs, which impacts on key-to-key, for CSI ratings that are obviously driven partly by key-to-key as well. So all of those have an ongoing impact and effect on us. I mean, one of the challenges that we have seen is that we moved very heavily to image estimating, which certainly had a place and still does have a place in the market for when COVID first came around, because obviously we didn't want customers coming on site. We wanted to obviously to remotely estimate wherever we could. What we have found through sort of measurement is probably 6 out of 10 of those estimates are accurate from source, but another 4 out of 10 probably aren't. And by that, it means the images simply aren't capable of capturing all of the damage that's required. So in good faith, we produce an estimate. That obviously then means a vehicle then will come on site when the parts are then available, because the parts are ordered at that stage. We then announce the parts have arrived, get the car gets booked in. When it arrives, then we have a look at the vehicle again, and obviously then there's a supplementary that's born out of the back of it, because we haven't seen certain damage that's been created by the image. Estimate was created in the first instance. We then order the new parts, but because there's been a lot of destocking of parts at dealerships over the last few years. There's been change in the supply chain with people like Ford moving to Parts Plus, and Volkswagen obviously with TPS, and other manufacturers less involved in parts supply. That has had a knock-on impact and an effect to us in terms of the provision of services and the supply of parts. So we're finding that is one of our biggest single challenges, is creating quite a big impact for us. Plus, I think the other thing to observe is, as well as where you have these new central supply chains, operated by some of the largest vehicle manufacturers, where they have the centralized parts distribution pieces. What that has served to do is taken some of the competitive tension out of the service levels that you would expect from a large vehicle manufacturer. And by that I mean, ultimately, if we weren't happy with a local service being provided by a local parts dealer, we could well within our rights to obviously go and look at the service that was going to be supplied elsewhere. And this isn't about moving in for discounts or for terms. This is often moving just purely because the service wasn't at an acceptable level. Now, of course, given the fact that we're directed to certain centres, we don't have that choice anymore. So if you're dealing with a service centre that actually isn't quite so good, that'll have quite a significant impact in terms of our ability to receive parts in a timely manner to get the vehicles repaired and back to the owners.
Goodness me. It sounds like a can of worms opening up there. And anything else in particular, Richard? We obviously mentioned the parts there, but anything else having an impact right now?
Well, it's commonly reported about lack of vehicles. Obviously, there was there's been a lack of vehicles coming off hire because there was a reduced vehicle manufacturer activity in that particular area last year, and we've even had instances whereby when we've got to hire cars, we've been told that actually there is a challenge in terms of getting some of those hire cars, and people are trying to balance them off with the availability. It's currently aided by the fact that there's lack of tourists coming into the UK, but when that starts to change, potentially as the lockdown eases to the next level through the latter part of the summer, if we're busy as well, compounded with the tourists starting to rock up with obviously less hire cars physically on the road, we could see some issues with regards to the supply of mobility, and we have been made aware that there could be some challenges in that particular sector. So it's about us trying to manage with our partners our repair capacity and what our demand for those hire cars are actually going to be. So that would be a fundamental, that would be something we'll be looking at very closely as the summer unfolds.
Very, very interesting. And I know we're all kind of, praying for a summer spike, but I suppose the opposite side of that is we may face other challenges. And
summer spike's already happened, Mark.
Well, yeah, that's very, very true. Yeah. And in terms of that, then, come on, tell us a little bit about that kind of spike that you referenced there.
Well, the fact is that there was a spike during June, a reasonably significant spike, and what's been quite telling is that was predicted by some insurers who said they thought there was going to be a spike coming, which was timed with the easing of the last stage of the lockdown levels. What we have seen unquestionably is a significant rise in referral volume during the course of June, and that has now stabilised back down again. And I know that estimates being produced are in just sub 80% again, having reached a peak of about 87-88% for a few days and week or so last month. So it's a question of saying is whether that's the first stage of the peak and we're back down the other side, or whether that'll level off now and then potentially start to come back to whatever normal looks like for probably Q4 of this year.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for joining us, Richard. Really appreciate your time.
No problem at all.
Okay, so here with Jeff Mack. Thanks very much for joining us, Jeff. How are you?
My pleasure. I'm good, Mark. Thanks.
Good man. Thank you very much. So again, a supply chain special. So looking at the world from a slightly different perspective, with your nationwide vehicle recovery assistance hat on. But what's happening at the moment within the business and the recovery sector as a whole?
Yeah, a number of interesting challenges, sort of post-COVID, as for everybody else. Lots of developments in various areas, both from a recovery point of view of actually recovering vehicles, because that landscape's changing towards EV, and I know we're going to talk about that in a bit. Also in terms of volume and in terms of decisions that recovery operators have made during and post COVID lockdowns. So volumes generally across the industry, including for us, are actually, we're probably going to have a busier year than we did in 2019. So volumes are generally up. Now there's a number of reasons that we speculate for that. Breakdowns are definitely up because people haven't used their cars as much. So you're getting breakdowns that you probably wouldn't have had the vehicle been running regularly on a daily basis. Volumes have started to tail off a bit in the last couple of weeks, but prior to that, they were very, very high. We have lots of vehicles in storage, which would normally be winter numbers. So I don't really know what's causing that backlog, if it's body shop capacity or whatever. But the thing that I found interesting, talking to Mick Jennings just now, who's our MD, is that there are a number of body shops, as you'll know, that through the COVID period have given some reflection to what they're doing, and have said, no, I've had enough. I don't want to do it now, and I'm going to call it a day. And that's happening with recovery operators as well, for a number of reasons. A bit like in the body shop sector, supply and demand. Demand has always outstripped supply in body shop and in recovery. And that's starting to change because the number of recovery agents is diminishing for various reasons. For example, if you, as a recovery operator, want to go into ULEZ in London, you need a Euro 6 truck. That's 100 grand. That's a £100,000 piece of kit just to be allowed to go in there. So many have said, no, I've had enough. And I think the COVID period has given many people time to reflect on that particularly. But yes, overall, volumes are amazing, but we also have quite a lot of new clients. So it's hard to really track, is it volume generally, or is it because of new clients? But I think it's a little bit of both, but generally it's been up. Last couple of weeks it's tailed off.
Yep, certainly echoes with what Richard Steer told us earlier on the show in terms of those volumes and that summer spike. So again, you just touched on it there, and it's an interesting subject because I know you guys are heavily involved in doing a lot of work around it. But electric vehicles, it's the talk of the industry, and you guys are kind of seeing this firsthand. You're living and breathing it on a daily basis now. So what are you currently seeing out there in terms of electric vehicles and how you go about handling these things?
We've done a huge amount of research on this. We've been working on this project I particularly have been working on it for 9 months. We've done a lot of research into our own network and our own capabilities alongside our network. And the results we're finding, we're very, very happy. We're very pleased because I think it's fair to say for post-accident recovery on EV, there is no one more qualified than us. I'm absolutely certain of that. And that's because, we've had a lot of experience. We've been the main supplier for a very large EV manufacturer for a number of years now. So we've learned and we've grown, and our network have grown as well. So in terms of recovering an electric vehicle, in terms of going to, and what I want people to remember here is we always talk about customer journey, okay? But the customer journey starts with us. We do FNOL, we do a lot of FNOL, but we're also the first on the scene. Now, the image of the insurance company or the vehicle manufacturer or whoever it is that we're recovering on behalf of is in our hands. So first and foremost, we've got to be professional. We start that customer journey. So, it's our intention to make a good impression. But from a technical point of view, If it's an electric vehicle, all our guys will know where the cut-off points are to isolate it and make it safe. If there's no battery damage, recovering an electric vehicle is simple. To make it safe, to lift it, to load it, to move it. No problem with any of that, just please don't tow it. It's when the vehicle has potential battery damage that is the real issue, because of the lithium-ion batteries and the fire risk. And we have done an inordinate amount of work around this. We're gathering specifications from all of the car manufacturers on the safe distance to store a vehicle should it need to go into storage and has potential battery damage. So we're going to be doing training on that for our partners and for anyone else who wants it. When I say our partners, I mean our agents. We already have a network of 210 fully qualified HEV recovery operators. But the key is knowing the risks, and there are a number of concerns here. You know, you give a huge amount of respect to the third rail on the London Underground, wouldn't you? If you were to walk down there, that's 750 volts. Electric cars are between 600 and 1,000 volts. So they're not toys. You know, if you send an Apple Watch battery back, you have to list it under Dangerous Goods Act. It's a lithium-ion battery. The fire expert we've been working with has seen one vehicle that was in storage, been put out by the fire brigade, and it reignited 6 times in 6 days with thermal overrun. So they're the big concerns and the big areas of liability, and people really need to engage with us and talk to us, because we are the first on the scene. We are the ones that make that call, and we're the ones that make sure it's handled safely. And I think, you know, by extension into the body shop sector, which is my world, as you know, I just don't think any of the infrastructure is ready, is there for repair, for handling of recovery, for, you know, in terms of charging points and there being enough. So I just think there's an awful lot to do in our entire industry to be prepared for the increase in the number of hybrid and electric vehicles. Fortunately, we're confident we can handle them safely at scene, but it's when it comes to storage, you know, how far do you store that vehicle from the next one? Every vehicle manufacturer's specification is different. Some say 5 metres from the nearest car, some say 12, some say 9. A couple of Korean manufacturers say 20 metres. So if you're going to store a vehicle for an insurer that's a write-off and has battery damage, are they going to pay a bill for 20 spaces all the way round that vehicle? So these are the sort of things that are not answered yet. But in the now, in the short term, if you have recovery issues on HEV, then, you know, we're confident we can handle any of that.
Great stuff, Jeff, and wow, I mean, just eye-opening. That's all you can say about what you've revealed there. I mean, you know, it's perhaps a bit of a silly question now, but you know, with what we currently know of EV management, you know, is it going to significantly change the vehicle recovery operation world, and likewise storage, likewise repair?
Yeah, it's inevitable, because the potential for reignition is the thing that worries me. The other area of concern, we recently engaged with a company that do amazing vehicle conversions. So they'll convert anything that's petrol or diesel to electric. You know, retrofit, clever engineering. But then you see things like the Mini, where the whole front, where the engine compartment is full of batteries. So, God forbid that has a crash. You know, those lithium-ion batteries sitting there, and the fire brigade, their general idea or their general feedback to us is, well, we're just there to put the fire out, and we leave it to the recovery operator. So we recognised very early on that we have to be ready, and we are. You know, but that's where the issue and the potential scares me a little bit, I must say, with the potential for fire in reviewing what I've looked at over the last 9 months.
Brilliant. Jeff, Thank you so much for the insight today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Mark, great stuff.
So thank you very much for joining us today, Mike. Really appreciate your time. How are you doing? You okay?
Yeah, very good, thank you. You're very welcome, by the way. Yeah, all good, all sort of healthy and fit, which is terrific.
Good stuff. So today, a little bit about the supply chain, and again, great to have you on to provide a little bit of a soundbite from a vehicle manufacturer perspective. So what would your kind of views be on this kind of supply chain challenges potentially that are currently faced across the world at the moment?
Sure. It's not my particular area of expertise. I've tapped into the knowledge of my colleagues in inventory and spoken to them about this. It's and obviously I think the main issue is around microprocessors and the availability of that type of component for anything that's electrical, really, and that's the first thing that they've called out. But it actually goes quite a bit deeper than that, because as well as the stuff that hits the headlines, the other things that they're talking about is actually around the base materials themselves. It's not just the automotive industry that's suffering from this. It is a worldwide issue. In that, it includes provision of timber. Now, fortunately, we don't make our cars out of wood, but it just illustrates that it's not just the automotive industry that's suffering from this. Steel, which obviously is very, very important to us, is another main issue. So, as well as the headlines, the electrical side of it, there's the impact of COVID, the lack of production during the COVID period, followed by a growth in demand, a substantial growth in demand as we're emerging from COVID, is putting into play the age-old supply and demand issues, and we're seeing the result of that at the minute.
Okay, fantastic insight there. So are we faced with parts challenges as an industry per se, or is it kind of inevitable that there'll be, the odd isolated case with certain parts at the moment?
I think it's inevitable. There's not least the change in demand for products that would not normally be included, or historically not included within vehicle manufacture production, for example. So, we're becoming an electric vehicle manufacturer. We have to, because of the regulations in the UK, and so the type of materials that we're using to produce cars is very different. That's creating a demand where there wasn't previously a demand, and the supply is having to catch up with that. Then you throw COVID into the mix, and inevitably you're going to have issues with supply. So yeah, I think it really is a combination. It's a bit of a perfect storm that we're seeing at the minute.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've already mentioned it yourself, but the same has been echoed in the home side of the ILC business. So yeah, it's interesting to see how the parallels exist there. And over the past couple of years, 2019 to 2021, the data which we revealed at the beginning of the show suggests that the average cost of parts per repair, continues to rise. Is it inevitable, given this kind of increasing complexity of modern vehicles, that this will be a long-term thing?
Yeah, I mean, there's the old adage of there's two things that you can be assured of, is death and taxes. I think there's a third element, which is vehicle technology is going to improve. It's within the nature of what we do. As I said, that will include new products, a different type of product that we're manufacturing the vehicle with. The cost of repair and the cost of parts. That is something that I've been challenged with in the past from the insurance industry around cost of parts. There's nothing that is inherent in our pricing that will generate a substantial spike. What I think we're experiencing is a different parts basket of repair. So back in the old days, you would see you'd replace a bit of plastic and maybe a few bits of metal, and away you go. It's the vehicle's repaired. Now we've got cameras, we've got sensors, we've got radars. There's a lot more electrical work. There's a lot more sophisticated technology that's going into the manufacturer of these vehicles. Inevitably, that is going to result in a higher repair basket. What I would hope, however, or certainly from a customer perspective, is that because of that technology, the vehicle's less likely to be involved in an incident, which means that they're less likely to require a repair. So it's a bit of a balance. You can't have both. You can't have sophisticated vehicles that are designed to avoid impact and then have a repair that is going to be the same as it was a number of years ago.
Great stuff. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Mike. Really appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
So thank you all so much for tuning in to today's ARC360 On Demand Supply Chain Special. I really hope you enjoyed the insights and took plenty away from the message from our great lineup of speakers. Once again, thank you to Paul, Kelvin, Richard, Jeff and Mike. I really hope you have enjoyed this series of the ARC360 On Demand. We'll be back on Wednesday, the 8th of September with plenty more discussions, insights and knowledge sharing to keep everyone in the loop. In the meantime, many thanks for joining us and for your continued support. Thanks all.
Thank you for watching ARC360 On Demand, brought to you in association with corporate partners BASF, BMS, CAPS, Copart, Mack, Integral, Enterprise Rent-A-Car, Innovation Group, Merca, Nationwide Vehicle Recovery Assistance, S&G Response, and Sherwin-Williams, along with our partners Aztec, the Green Parts Specialists, Indasa, and Preco UK. We look forward to you joining us next time at ARC360 On Demand.